today is St. Patty's Day over here on the day we're recording this. And I had the most ridiculous encounter with my little one this morning. Comes running down the stairs and goes, "Oh, I gotta go check the toilet." And this is not something you want to hear a kid say.
No, that's reason for panic there.
Yeah. So you're like, "What's happening?" And he runs back out. And he goes, "Ha!" I go, "What's happening?" He goes, "The leprechauns didn't paint the toilet green." And I go, "What?"
Oh no!
And he goes, "Yeah, that's what the leprechauns do. They paint the toilet green." And I go, "In what universe is that what leprechauns do? They paint the toilet green." I had no idea what he was talking about. "Oh, Daddy, they didn't paint it." And he goes, "Yeah, if you try to catch a leprechaun, they paint your toilet green." And I go, "What? What is happening?"
Did you ever figure it out or not?
No, what is it?
They always talk about the leprechaun's pot of gold, and he knows that when he was being toilet drained, you told him to go sit on the pot. I guarantee it. I guarantee he's heard you call the toilet the pot, and he's conflating that with the leprechaun sits on.
Why would a child think that a leprechaun is going to paint a toilet green? It's the weirdest thing. I honest to God, Brett, do you ever have one of those moments where it's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm moment where you just kind of stare out the window of your house and you just hear bum, 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 da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, what is happening right now that my child thinks that leprechauns paint a toilet green? What is even occurring?
Where have you gone wrong in life?
So then I had to sit him down on my knee. I'm like, "Buddy, it's time to tell you the truth about leprechauns. All right, so here's what they are. They're tiny little forest sprites." And then I start launching into the...
But they don't use any indoor plumbing.
They're not familiar with it.
Yeah, there's
Listen,
none of that.
They came about long before indoor plumbing existed. They are not familiar with John Crapper or his incredible invention. By the way, the fact that that's the dude's actual name, John Crapper, is amazing.
Yeah, isn't that great?
That's like chef's kiss good as far as history.
Well, I wonder if that's, going back through the etymology of it, I wonder if that's where we get the whole idea of a crap, or whether crap predated that.
My spidey sense is in the same way that you're like, I've got to use a Kleenex or I'm going to go in the jacuzzi.
Yeah.
It must have been marketed as a trademark thing where it's like, "Oh, the new crapper," like, and then people are like, "Yeah, I'm going to go sit on the crapper," and then I'm going to go take a crap. Like, you can see how language would have, I think you're right, that it probably evolved from crapper to crap. Anyway, this has been another edition of ComicLab. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
There always have to be Lucky Charms.
Oh, God. Oh, in context. Oh, on that note, he just looked, the leprechaun just looks dead and goes, "Yellow moons, blue stars."
I don't remember eating yellow moons.
On that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his purple-hearted friend, Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Strip.
Yeah, you got to get that looked at. And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. First, I want to give a shout-out to our sponsor for this week over at WACOM.com, the good folks at Wacom and the makers of the new Wacom One. And Brad, in the spirit of quarantine, guess what I brought into the bedroom last night?
Oh, brought it right into the bedroom, did you?
I did. And my wife says, "Well, prepare for a steamy night," as I set up my Wacom One in the bed.
Yeah, that's multitasking, man.
Don't mind me as we watch This Old House. I'm just going to be drawing in the bed. No, but I got to tell you, it was really nice to have it in the bed. It was... Jeez, if you guys could see Brad's look right now. I'm talking about the Wacom, Brad. I'm talking about the Wacom.
It's really hard doing this podcast with you because I'm not supposed to touch my face, and I spend most of the show going... face palming.
Just slapping foreheads. No, it was really nice because my previous portable Wacom was the Cintiq Companion, which is now, I guess, a version of the Mobile Studio Pro. Mm-hmm. And had a big fan on it and was pretty heavy, so it tended to warm up the old crotch, and not in the way you want in the bedroom. And I'm getting Brad today.
Boy, this one is just this. We're gonna lose the sponsorship after today. Mark my words. They're just gonna write in and say, "That's it. We don't want you guys." And actually, we're gonna pay you to not talk about our product from now on.
Well, yes, just only Brad may speak of it. So the thing about the Wacom One, though, light as a feather, no heat transfer at all, really pleasant in the bedroom. I gotta stop saying in the bedroom. It makes it so creepy when I say in the bedroom.
No, but it is really nice, and I've been getting a lot of. I'm going to be honest with you because I'm this way with a new gadget. I get really excited about it for the first couple days, and then I put it on my shelf and I go back to the stuff that I've always been using. Because it's more inured into my
inured. And for those following along at home, that's the word of the week for this podcast. Inured, the word of the week. So the next time you hear that in the show,
say the secret word and make $1,000 happen. I go back to my old tools, and I have not forsaken my Wacom One yet, which is real. I really kind of I wouldn't say that on the show, but man, I can't put it down. It's just gotten it's made a little home in my routine, and there it has stayed.
Indeed. So we say thank you to Wacom and the new Wacom One for sponsoring the podcast this week. And Brad, I've got the first question for you. Let's dive right into it. This comes in from our Patreon backer over at patreon.com/ComicLab. It's Alistair Cooper. And Alistair writes, "Hello, I'm interested in your thoughts on substack.com/about as a subscription tool in relation to Patreon and whether it indicates upcoming growth in subscription options in general. What do you think?" So, Brad, I'll be honest, I have never heard of Substack, so I want to hear your thoughts about this. You are always more attuned to this sort of thing. What are your thoughts about using Substack.com versus Patreon and the possibility of more options for fundraising? Like, what's the other one called? Ko-Fi? I want to say Kofifi, but
Ko-Fi is one of the K-O-F-I. I think you're supposed to pronounce it coffee, buy me a cup of coffee. But
oh, right.
Yeah, these words are getting chewier and chewier as we go down the line. But so I hadn't heard of Substack either. So I was eager to go take a look at it. And the first thing you see when you go to the Substack page is that they've got kind of like an example on their homepage where it says, basically, I've got, somebody who's got, 700 followers is making about $4,000. Which is great because when you do that from a company standpoint, I can do the math on that really quick. And I don't even have to ask myself, is this a good replacement? Because if I'm able to do simple math, I don't even have to answer the question, right? So when I did that math, I realized that they are taking 20% off the top, given the numbers that they used on their front-facing example, okay? Patreon is still taking 5% for light users and grandfathered-in creators, plus payment processing that typically amounts to another 5%. That's still a total of about 10%, okay? Is Substack a replacement for Patreon? Not when they're taking 20%, because not only are they taking more money, nobody's ever heard of them. Why would I trade Patreon, who is the hands-down leader in this? All right, even when you take into effect that I've said it 100 times, I'm a big Patreon fan. It's hard for me to be critical of them, even though it happens from time to time. Take away that. Patreon is the undisputed leader in this, which means that if somebody is tempted to become my backer, there's a good chance they've already got a Patreon account. In other words, I don't have to clear that hurdle of making that potential backer create a new account. There's a good chance they've already backed somebody else on Patreon, and now it's coming around to me. I'm not really a big fan of going to a non-entity, right, and then trying to convince people to start a new account with them.
Yes.
And then after all that work, they're taking 20% when Patreon's taking 10%. There's
Right.
no upside to me. So no, I don't see a really a big benefit to Substack. And as far as this idea of looking for Patreon alternatives, you've got to really, really work hard to beat a company that again has a good chance of having that person that might be a backer. They might also have a much better chance of having a Patreon account than of having a Ko-Fi account or a Substack account or all of those other places. You've got a really good chance of them already being signed up. I don't see the point. Am I wrong, Dave?
No, you're not wrong. I don't say that just because I'm inured to Patreon. Oh, that's today's word again, inured. I don't say that just because I'm inured to Patreon. I I think Brad is right, and so I wanna say what Brad said, but in a different way, which is that when you try to get someone as a Patreon supporter, the one thing you have to do is emotionally convince them that they enjoy it enough to support. When you
Yeah,
want to get them to be a Substack supporter, you have to one, explain to them what the hell Substack is, right? So that's step
right.
one. You have to two, get them to the right URL. Most people now are at least familiar with Patreon as a URL, right? But
Yeah.
now you have to go because who knows how things are spelled in today's internet. It could be
Yes.
SUBBSTAKK, right? You don't know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to give them the right URL, and then you have to emotionally convince them to. So you have to do three things when you have a new platform like that
Yeah.
versus an existing. And again, we're not the ultimate cheerleaders for Patreon, but it's just at this point it has built up a network effect where it's easier to get someone to pull the trigger and become a Patreon backer than it is to say like, "Hey Brad, check out my new site, supporttheartist.com/Dave Kellett," like and you're like, "Wait,
Yeah.
what's support the artist? Is that like something for theaters?" No, no, it's like Patreon. Oh, then why don't you use Patreon? Ah, it's for people that don't like Patreon, that
That's
kind of thing.
that you just hit the nail on the head. When you say it's just like Patreon, if you've got to tell me that the thing that you're using is just like Patreon, the next question is, well, then why aren't you using Patreon?
Right. Right. And so, like, I'd be curious to talk to someone who uses Ko-Fi/Coffee. Do they say, yeah, you can support me on Coffee. It's just like Patreon, or
Yeah.
do they say it's just like Coffee? I mean, I don't know.
They,
I don't know what that
when
pitch
I see
is.
it on social media, it's always buy me a cup of coffee.
Oh,
That
buy me a
that
cup of
kind of
coffee. Okay.
phraseology, which I don't know. Again, I don't like that because that you buy a cup of coffee, that's a one-time thing.
Right.
And what we're trying to encourage is building a membership into a community that's exclusive of super fans.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just you've gotta really you gotta be really operating at the absolute top percent to be a real threat to Patreon right now, I'm not seeing a whole lot of real contenders.
Yeah, it's going to start. I mean, here's the thing: is we all know what the network effect is, which is like Facebook. When
Mhm.
80% of your friends and your mother and your cousins are on there, you're like, all right,
Right,
I'm going to join that one because that's the easiest one.
right.
Uh, when every artist that you follow or like, or potentially will follow or like, are on Patreon, the
Mhm.
network effect is that it's easier to get their cross fans to sign up for Brad Geiger or for Dave Kellett,
Yeah.
right? It's much easier because it's already established. The whole network is understood. All the systems are in place. All that sort of thing. So, unless Patreon really screws the pooch with this or that decision, I think it's safest to, for now,
Mhm.
go with them. But a question that we didn't address with Alistair's question, which is it a good thing? Are we seeing more growth in this field? I think yes. I think the fact that Kickstarter was considering it for a while and still in their heart of hearts would like to consider it is a good
Mhm.
sign. I think personally, I feel like Apple could make a really good artist supported system, especially for music, if they wanted to. I don't
Yeah.
think that they're in that business, but um, I think I could see a world where they could do a really good job of it. I could see FaceTime doing a good job of it, even though I don't like FaceTime. And so, Facebook, what did I say?
Yeah.
FaceTime. I'm an old man, Brad.
Well, I
Um,
mean, listen, again, there is a potential at some point for something to go on with Patreon that makes it a bad deal, right? They
right,
could screw things up.
right.
It's possible. So in that regard, I'm happy to see a lot of contenders being developed,
Yes.
so that at some point you've got some place to jump if and when you need it. That's definitely a good thing. But as we said several episodes ago, I'm not a big fan of this whole idea of signing up with each one of them and trying to promote each one of them and saying, well, if you don't
No.
want to support me on Patreon, you can support me on Ko-Fi. And if you don't want to support me on Ko-Fi, hit my OnlyFans. And if it's not OnlyFans, it's Substar. And it's that's a duplication of efforts that
Yes.
just doesn't
Agreed.
bring in a good yield.
Yep. And I think, however, I will say that both Brad and I would probably agree to this, that the ecosystem of platforms, many platforms existing, also spurs innovation. And so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
In the same way that Google has a little bit given up the ghost on innovating a lot because, it doesn't have to compete as much with as it did back in the day with Yahoo and that kind of thing. So the speed of innovations is hopefully will be helped by the fact that Substack exists and Ko-Fi exists and all these other ones exist. So it's good for us as artists to have backups. It's good that they exist for innovation. I don't think that Brad and I would necessarily say go with them, but and again, that's not just because we're inured to Patreon. Oh, there it is again! Oh boy! The word of the day.
What is it that you keep shaking over there? Is it a spoon in a glass? What are you doing?
Okay, this is more than anyone wants to know. I have old like, how the pharmacies in like the 1880s to 1920s had those glass jars with the metal lids?
Yeah, like a beaker.
Yeah, that's what I use to keep my art pens in.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a really nice, it's a classy way to present art pens. And so I have them I just happen to have it in my closet. So when we decided that inured was the word of the day, then that's what
they're great for sound effects too. I mean, I remember my pharmacist, his podcast had great sound effects.
I rarely say this on the podcast, but fuck you.
You know what's great? You know what's great about this whole COVID thing is that it's got everybody right on the edge, and all the reactions are way more true than they. We're gonna have some great podcasts coming up as all of us get more and more frayed at the edges.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? It's great to live with constant chest pounding anxiety. It's been good for me. It's been nice.
Anything that doesn't kill you just brings you one more step closer to death. That's what I always say.
In my case, anything that doesn't kill you makes me lose a dramatic amount of weight all of a sudden in a way that my doctor would probably be concerned about.
Oh my God, no! I've gone right back to eating my feelings over here. Oh my God, yeah.
So you and I are gonna become Jack Sprat could eat no fat, his wife could eat no lean on the podcast. Is what we'll become.
Yeah, we're just gonna go right opposite of where we are right now.
Okay, so before we bring in our big. Wow! I almost talked over that. What a great insult that was.
I couldn't hold it in, man.
I got to give you props for that one. That was a good one. So, Brad, before we bring in our big special guest of the day, I just want to send a reminder out to everybody that I am kickstarting a project, possibly in the worst time in human history to kickstart a project. It is over at storylineshow.com. It is a long-form, intense, deep, thoughtful interviews with comic creators and animators. So far, we have Phil Lord and Chris Miller of Lego Movie and of Spider-Verse, the Academy Award winner. We've got Scott McCloud of Understanding Comics and Making Comics. And we've got Raina Telgemeier of Guts and Smile and Sisters. And so those are the first three announced, in addition to Jake Parker, who we also revealed. And then a little somebody else special that you might know about.
A very special reveal coming up.
Very
maybe even revealed now.
But listen, I am a pragmatist. I have, as much as I am, I'm both confident and insecure as an artist, but I don't say this in an insecure way. It literally launched at the worst time in human history. So if it fails, I'm not going to take it personally. We'll try again in 2 years when the recession's over. And that'll be that. But I hope you'll give it a consideration because, gosh, it would be lovely to make this project, especially in a time of quarantine, have some delightful, long-form, thoughtful commentary on comics from some of the best creators in the world. So it's over at StorylineShow.com. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, Brad, we have a wonderful voice joining us on the old microphones today. Coming all the way from Canada, our wonderful friend Lar deSouza, cartoonist on Looking for Group at lfg.co, Least I Could Do at leasticouldddo.com, and currently working on charity avatars for multiple sclerosis at tinyurl.com/mscure2020. Lar, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Dave. Brad, great to talk to you always.
So we have known you for many a moon. You are like us, are one of the older gents. I don't know how to say that in webcomics. I just out of curiosity, because I've never asked you this. When did you know you had the spark for cartooning? Was it 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, or was it much later?
Oh, earlier.
Really?
Honestly, well, funny, I was not the artist in the family. My older brother was.
Really?
He knew at an early age he wanted to be a cartoonist, an animator. We have a picture of him at like 3 or 4 drawing Popeye at the kitchen table. And as a little brother, I copied my big brother.
Mm-hmm.
So cartooning was I never thought of it as a career. It was just something I did.
Ah.
I was one of the artists in the class. I just drew, and I remember my earliest cartooning memory is trying to draw Beanie Boy from Cecil and Beanie, a Bob Clampett cartoon, and being frustrated that I could visualize Beanie, but I couldn't draw him.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was actually like trying to draw him with my eyes closed because I could visualize it, but as soon as I opened my eyes, it went away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you now. So you are, probably many moons in now, but you have been successfully collaborating now. And take Brad and I through that process of how you two specifically work on Looking for Group and on Least I Could Do. How does that work for you?
Well, it's terribly boring. Soma writes the words, I draw the pictures. That's pretty much it.
Well, take us through, because I think people would like to hear it. What are the brass tacks? Does it come to you in email? Do you have a shared
No, he
to-do
emails
folder?
me the script every day. That's the thing. The man will not buffer unless there's a trip or something. Before he had children, I managed to convince him that having a couple weeks buffer was a thing, and that worked. And he agrees it would be a smart thing to do, and he can never maintain it. But then he wears so many hats in the company. He does so much more than just write.
Yeah.
But anyway, so typically for Least I Could Do, he writes it the day before. I'll get it in my email in the morning, usually. And it will be broken down. It's a 4-panel strip. In the case of LFG, times a week, LFG is a little more fluid, but it's still kind of broken down into the cells, the page beats. But I have a little flexibility there if I need it. If something occurs to me that it would be, but visually, his direction is really just the setting. They're in the castle, they're in the office, they're in the car. And the characters are having that interaction. He might specify a look. But usually that's just, at this point, I know the characters so well myself, I get the tone of voice.
Right.
So he doesn't have to tell me, make this person smiling, make this person angry, make this.
Gotcha. So kind of notes that a writer would give an artist in year one, you're not getting anymore because the collaboration is so well tuned. I guess at this point.
Even in our early years, in our year one, when I might occasionally get an expression wrong, and he would have trouble explaining what the expression was, I would like physically call him up and say, recite the line. Or if we were together at a con and I was doing something, I'd say, make the face, and he would just grimace at me, or he would say it and I'd hear the tone and like, got it. Because when we first started, he said, give me a menu of expressions, and I went, no. That's not how this works.
That's the range of human experience. No, I'm not doing that.
It's like, smile. It's like, this isn't, give me a smile, give me an angry. No, just give me the words. I'll draw. That's my part of this.
Right.
So unless it's like a super specific reference, I just go off and make up the visuals. You know, the character Rain just moved, so I designed a new living space.
Now, if you're working on an update and you get an idea like, oh, we could do this and make it even better, do you have that flexibility, or do you leave the ideation conceptually completely up to Ryan, and your job is to bring that what he wrote to life in the best possible way?
I will make suggestions to him from time to time, absolutely, or we'll just wind up riffing together on something, and something will come out, and then later I'll get a script about it. But I don't. It's very rare that I actually want to change his words.
Yeah.
Generally, the couple times I've really had to tell him I can't do this, it's because he's a wordy fellow and forgets the physical limitations, and so the terms is just like, I can't break this word bubble up to make it fit.
Right.
You really, but that's really rare. I want to say that's only happened 2 or 3 times. I usually find a way around it.
Yeah.
That's probably the writer-artist's classic lament, though, is that, like, there's a lot of words here.
There's a lot
I
going
need to
on.
be able to fit a drawing into this square.
and he does not entirely get the scale of things, especially in looking for group. We've had things where, you know, there's a dwarf and a dragon and a minotaur in the same frame. It's like, this doesn't work. She comes up to his knees, and I have to get a camera angle that fits all these elements in.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, and they're all, you know, did you remember that they're all locked in close quarters, or did you remember that they're all in mid sky or something?
Right.
And there was one time he got quite put out with me because he wanted them being attacked by, I can't remember, it was like spears and I drew arrows, or it was arrows and I drew spears. And because he was setting up for a joke in the next page, but he hadn't told me this, and he hadn't sent me the page, and it was like, I have not drawn anybody with that particular weapon for the past 3 pages. So I didn't think it was important. They're being attacked. So I just used but he had a gag in mind and I didn't know it. So it's like, I draw, I don't read minds.
Yeah.
But we, you know, a minor mishap, you know, in our long career together.
So now, Lar is one of these people that I find perennially frustrating, if you don't mind my saying, Lar.
Okay, here we go.
I follow Lar on a number of social media, most noticeably Twitter, where he is at Lartist, Lartist. And the problem with Lar is you've got this guy over there that is doing 2 full-time comic properties, right? And that are updating constantly. Every week, boom, 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 boom. You're getting a ton of stuff. And then every time you turn around, he's got these other... they're not sketches; they're fully done pieces of art.
They're fully rendered. They're beautiful.
These gorgeous illustrations that he's just popping up there, and he'll say stuff like, "Well, I just got this idea, so I decided to do it." It's something that I would take, you know, a couple of hours on easily, and he's just like, "Oh, here's just this idea I did, and it's better than most of the stuff that I spend hours on." What's your? I don't know that you can tell us how you do that.
Have you seen the size of my butt? I don't move very much.
But like Brad and I get frustrated because you still have a joy for drawing that we've lost years ago. You're like,
no,
you're still like, oh, I've got a free minute. Let me try to
There's-
redo this.
There's so much happiness in your artwork. I love looking at your stuff.
Oh no, I'm kidding, of course. But like,
but
I guess what we're saying is you are constantly experimenting and drawing for the love of drawing in a way that frankly is beautiful. And Brad and I admire to no end. I mean, you also have, and Brad didn't mention this, but I find it amazing that you are constantly experimenting with styles that are not your own. You'll take on a manga that is you've never drawn before, or you'll take on an old classic comic strip that you've never drawn before, or a Warner Brothers style that you've never drawn before. And it's like, good God, Lar's always experimenting and trying and doing, and I can see you expanding your toolbox just by trying it, you know?
Well, that's I mean, that's how you learn, right? I mean, you go to life drawing and you draw the model. You go to object drawing, you draw the objects to learn to draw them, to build up that mental library. And that's I do want to learn. I do want to uh learn to draw things my way.
Mm-hmm.
Or one of my art heroes, Al Hirschfeld, the great American caricaturist. I remember seeing his art as a child and wanting to draw those long lyrical lines, and I thought, okay, I'll need to learn to ink with a brush. And I practiced inking with a brush, and I practiced creating these long lyrical lines, and then decades later found out he used a nib pen. And those lines are built up of thousands of tiny, delicate lines.
Yeah.
And if you see one of his originals, they're beautiful, but they're massive and they're reduced down tremendously.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, thank God, because my only experience to that point was using a nib pen in grade 9 art as a lefty on, typing paper. It was a miserable experience, and I hate it. I love pens now, but I would have tried to do it his way and been frustrated.
Right.
Yeah.
And I realized in hindsight, I don't need, it's great to watch somebody work. It's great to ask those questions like, what pencil, what's your magic pencil? What's your magic tool to make you do this art? But it's better for me to integrate it into my tool set and think about more like, how do I create that line? Not how did Bill Watterson create that line? How do I work with the tools I have versus what he has or she has?
You do a beautiful job of it because it's always distinctly you, and yet you nail the spirit of Warner Brothers or of old classic 1930s comics or whatever it is.
A youth ill spent watching television.
No, I mean it speaks to how you have become as good as you become, is because even now when no one is pushing you to do it, you are continuing to experiment and to teach yourself and to grow. Don't you think, Brad?
Yeah. Well, something I also want to find out is what were your early art influences? Because I when I see your art, I have an idea of what the answer is, and I want to know how closely it lines up. Who were your real big art influences early on?
Well, my biggest one, as I said, is my older brother Gerard, because he was, like I said, the natural drawer. So it was the cartoons I was watching. It was the classic Warner Brothers and MGMs. The Tom and Jerry's. I didn't know who Tex Avery was at the time, but they were on there. But I guess it was the older Tom and Jerry's. It was Beanie and Cecil. Bob Clampett was the first director name I knew because it was part of the song, and Chuck Jones was probably the second. So it was a lot of that. I read a lot of superhero comics, but I didn't. I never quite nailed that dynamic anatomy the way other comic artists do, as much as I did the silly, funny stuff. And I realized too, I've had part of my career has been a professional caricaturist, that I've always been a face junkie. I was the kid drawing the other friends and the teachers, and certainly that experience as a quick draw artist doing live caricatures, I think, has helped me be as quick at picking up some of those little trademarks, those house styles of what makes this a 1920s cartoon, what makes this a Chuck Jones versus a Robert McKimson, what makes this a Tex Avery or Bob Clampett or a manga, that speaks to that visual language.
Yeah. Now, I'm going back to those illustrations you're constantly sharing on social media. I know that a lot of those end up on your store, right? For example, you've got lardist.myshopify.com where you've got prints. You've got a Redbubble store as well. I know that. I'm blanking on the URL off the top of my head.
That's Redbubble. It's long. It's like Redbubble/people/Uncle Lar.
Yeah, Unca, UNCA Lar, Unca Lar.
Unca Lar.
So So a lot of the web cartoonists listening to the show, for them, how does that strategy work for you? Do you find that is this kind of a one of the reasons that you do these illustrations and share them so freely on social media? Is this to drive traffic to those sites? And if so, does that work well as a strategy?
No, not really. I'm sorry. The Shopify and the Redbubble got born out of more calling people's bluffs when somebody says, "I would love that on a T-shirt," and I could say, "Okay, here."
That's the reason I did my Redbubble store too.
Yeah, exactly.
It was originally for the calendars, but they stopped doing calendars, and now the only reason I keep it is because literally, Lara, I do the same thing. Somebody says I want that on a T-shirt, and it pisses me because imagine being in my head. The nicest thing you could say, I get pissed off. I immediately put it up on Redbubble because it takes 30 seconds, and I go, "It's there now. Buy it." And of course, you know how the rest of it goes.
Right. And, there was a period when prints sold. It seems to have slowed down significantly. So, and I do so much stuff. And so it's just, I don't put everything up on the print shop because that would just be unwieldy. And I really should cull what's there. What's there is mostly old. But I finally made a link called "The One You Saw on My Social Media."
That's brilliant.
So now if somebody says, "I would love that as a print, can I get that?" I send them that one link.
Yeah.
Where it's just
smart.
like, pay your $10 and send me a note saying which one you saw.
Right.
And I will print it and send it because everything is digital. So, and everything's a good enough resolution. I'll just print off what you want.
And of course, they immediately disappear at that point. It's like showing a crucifix to a vampire. They just go into a puff of smoke.
Yeah. That occasionally, what is it, like $1.21 that you get from Redbubble or something. But at the same time, I was like, shop at your leisure. Put it on your birthday list, put it on your Christmas list or whatever. Go away, kid, you bother me. It's
So you're sharing this stuff not out of a strategy, but just out of pure love and out of the fact that you've got all these ideas and this
pure love and I enjoy the feedback of somebody liking what I've done. I'm not one to keep, as the old song goes, my light is not under a bushel basket. I'm doing it. I might as well share it.
Right. Well, one of the things that I admire you, speaking of goodness of your heart, is that you have a markedly cheery and optimistic and supportful voice in comics.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could talk real quick, maybe this is a good way to end off the chat today, actually, is talk about your philosophy of cartooning, because kindness seems to be a very big part informing you how you do and what you do in your cartooning.
It's word be hard. This is why I draw. Philosophy is such a big word, but I guess, I am grateful for where I am. You live in the dream here. I get to draw. On my worst day at work, I'm drawing funny pictures.
Yeah.
Right.
And I go through, as a caricaturist, I go through a world of eye candy. I look at faces. I imagine how I might draw them. I look at body language and postures. I look at animals and things and creatures and go, that's neat. I should remember that. Speaking of,
as you said that, an orange tabby just jumped right up on the desk there.
Literally leaped up right as he said, and animals who love me, and literally a bird flying into his hand.
I break into Disney song. But this is, I say, art's my work, art's my hobby, and art's my therapy. And if I can, certainly I've poo-pooed. I've had my snide moments of looking at somebody's art, going, "Really? So you got paid for that?" But it would be less than being the best person I can hope to be if I didn't share what I know with a novice artist or somebody who was asking genuinely. I've had teachers, I've had friends, I've had opportunities. I'm not reinventing the wheel. There's no secrets here. There's no apprentice mixing up a special formula for phthalo blue. Um, it's all just like, okay, I use Clip Studio. You use Clip Studio? I love it. Have you seen this tip? Have you seen this
Right,
trick?
Yeah.
right.
Can I help share? Can I make, because what that person's going to do is then going to turn around and inspire me, because they're going to use that tool or
Right.
that
That's
art.
true. Yeah, it's paying it forward in a way that becomes circular. It's nice. So the kindness that always springs to mind is not only did you teach Brad and I and so many other people Clip Studio Pro in a way that was completely selfless,
Yeah.
but there was a time when I was making Stripped, and I didn't say it to the world yet, but I had gotten mailed to me a watercolor from Bill Watterson for the Strip poster. And I needed to know how to isolate out the watercolor foreground from the watercolor background so that I could mimic that watercolor on white look that he had on a lot of his back covers.
Yeah.
And of all the people online, Lar, you were the only one that both knew how to do it and would kindly take the time to talk me through how to do it. And it saved my butt. It made that poster happen. And there was no benefit to you. It was out of pure kindness that you did it. And I am eternally grateful to you for that.
What do you mean there was no benefit to me? I got to enjoy the poster of Stripped. I got to see the work get fulfilled.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is, it is a lesson for the younger artists out there that take a page from Lar, that his kindness has informed his career, and in doing so, he has helped lift up many others around him. And those of us around him are grateful both for his work and for his kindness with his work. So thank you for that, Lar. So anyway, I want to say thank you, Lar, for coming on the show. And you can check out his work very much on the regular at Looking for Group at lfg.co, at Least I Could Do at leasticoulddo.com. And then a very special one that we would like to give a shout out to. He does charity avatars raising money for multiple sclerosis research at tinyurl/mscure2020. So Lar, thank you again for coming on the show. And man, we couldn't have been more grateful for you being here.
You are very welcome. It's been a pleasure always talking with you guys.
Thanks, Lar. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
So, Dave, we've got a question from one of our Patreon backers. You think you're ready for this one?
Let's do it, compadre.
All right. This comes in from Paul Kajeji, who says, eBooks, what's your hot take on them? What is the best format to compress them to, and which are the best platforms for distributing? Smashwords, Apple Store, Comixology, etc. Are they still a thing worth investing time in producing? So that comes from Paul. Dave, what do you think? Let's have your hot take on ebooks.
I like the word "hot take" on ebook, because if there's ever a topic that doesn't feel like it's hot take, it's ebooks.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how you would come up with like a really snarky, controversial statement about ebooks.
Like, imagine me up on a median stage with a cigarette kind of dangling from my mouth. Like, I got some thoughts about ebooks. Oh, I got some thoughts. I'm going to share them.
Yeah,
all right, no, so
I tell you, first I got to find my e-bookmark. Am I right, ladies and gentlemen?
So my hot take on ebooks is that it is a great supplemental. It is not the main or bulk part of my business by any stretch or vague dream of my imagination. Will it ever be a main part of my business? But it is a great and very easy to do supplement for my business. I tend to create my ebooks in PDF format. They seem to run on most platforms, PDFs do. And I can tinker with and control the level of resolution to a point that I really like for my artwork and legibility, but also keep the size down. So PDFs, I find, are really nice for me. As to what I do with them, I personally have a Shopify run site. And Shopify allows for built-in ebook sales. And so it's a self-downloading type thing. So you don't have to get involved. You don't have to hunt down a file and send it to someone when they've purchased the thing. It's all automated. And again, I can hook that right up to my Bonjoro so I can thank them right afterward. And I do find for some of my books, like for my bigger drive books that are a little bit more expensive to send physically around the world because they are a 2.5, 3 pound book, that the ebook sales for those have actually been quite nice. And so I like to have it. It's a nice, and it's also, it's as a value add for Kickstarters, ebooks are great. So the fact that they exist in your store and then they are value adds in a Kickstarter has been great for me. like for what we're doing over at StorylineShow.com. Haha, worked it in again, Brad. Look at that.
Look at what you did.
But I want to hear, because Brad is actually far better at this, and I think we should all listen to what Brad has to say about ebooks. So I'm going to turn to my friend Bradley J. Geiger and ask him what he does with ebooks.
Well, I underline what you're saying about PDFs. PDFs are pretty universal, and I like something that I think I picked up from you, Dave. I don't know who I first saw doing this, but I also make a point to tell people that this is a DRM-free PDF, which stands for Digital Rights Management,
Right.
which is just a fancy way of saying you get to actually download a file when you make a purchase. It's not something that Comixology is holding on to and they grant you access to it. And then if something ever happens to Comixology, guess what? You don't have that file anymore,
Right.
which, by the way, sounds like it's silly. But Dave and I can both tell you it's happened plenty of times already. Going back to the Webcomics Weekly days, we were warning people about that. But so I first tell people it's a DRM free, which means that they get to actually download the file. I like PDFs, and also I'll tinker with that compression a little bit, and I will give people an option to get a higher res PDF or a super low res PDF if they want to really minimize the amount of space this thing is taking up to make it run quicker on their device.
Yeah.
And because it's no skin off my nose to make two different versions of it. And then if they don't like the one, they can always download the other one, you know. But yeah, I like PDFs. Now, since I've been splitting my comics into panels for displaying on that vertical scroll that Webtoons has,
Right.
or the horizontal swipe that Instagram has, or now on my own website, Evil Inc., it has, when you come with a mobile device, it automatically presents you with that vertical scroll. Since I've got all of those panels separated out anyway, I'm going to experiment this next time around, and I think it's probably going to be an EPUB format, but I'm going to experiment with offering a book that's all separated into panels. So you just basically swipe down and down and down and down and down and down and down.
Oh.
The only thing I've got to figure out there, speaking about bookmarks, is how to allow people to bookmark that. And because I haven't formatted in EPUB yet, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a learning curve there. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking about doing in this next round. Is to give somebody something that they can literally read right on their phone.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I never would have thought to do that. I will also add that one of the things that I do with ebooks that is probably intuitive, but I will mention it for people that are doing it for the first time, is don't forget to include all the ancillary stuff. The front cover, the inside flap of the front cover if it's got something on it, the back inside flap, the back cover. People appreciate that it's a full book experience, and they don't just want the contents and some weird title page. Give them the whole thing. And so I know that sounds weird maybe in the sense that obviously that's what you would do, but some people surprisingly do not. And very often that's because it's built in two different files. You know, they've built the interior of their book in InDesign, and they built their cover in Illustrator, and they didn't want to take the extra 20 minutes to marry the two together. But do give people the full package when you produce the ebook. And as far as what platforms to sell it on, frankly, anything that works for you is fine by Brad and I think it's a fairly easy system, Brad, don't you think? If someone wants to take the time, I will say though the returns are not great. That's why I only tend to put it on my Shopify store, and that's it. Because for me, it's not worth the time. Like I can literally tell you, it probably is $1,000 a year, maybe 1,500 if I'm smiling.
I'm telling you, you hit the nail on the head in that really one of the only reasons I do ebooks is to assign them a value in my store so that later when I'm using them for Kickstarter rewards, they've got an established value. And you can make it, depending on where you're at with that, you can kind of price them a little bit higher so that Kickstarter value is a little bit lower.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I find that, like Brad, my greatest value for my ebooks are perceived value on the market that I can then translate into a value add for Kickstarter. So I think for that, Brad and I would both recommend it. But anyway, good luck with that one. And
hold on, I got more thoughts.
Brad is inured of this topic.
Oh, you're the funniest pharmacist I've ever met.
God.
No, I got one more thought, and that is platforms. I've got real opinions on platforms. I don't do anything through Apple, even though I'm a big fan of Apple, because I tried it once. And the amount of work I was doing in exchange for the money I was getting by the time all the cuts got taken, the math didn't add up. Comixology was very much the same for me when it came down to that. There was so many hoops I had to jump through to get something up on Comixology, and I was not getting the traction that I would have expected. I've also experimented with Kindle Direct Publishing, in which I had a little bit better experience. But I'm going to tell you right now, your best bet is either to do it the way Dave is doing it on a Shopify account and doing it personally, or using either Gumroad or Drive-Through Comics, which both of which I've had really good luck with. In fact, I get checks from them on the regular. Gumroad, obviously, I like because not only does it give you a plug and play buying system that when you put it on your site, they can just click that link and then it pops up on their screen and they can buy it right there. And they do good service after the sale, in which, like, and this happens to me every now and again, if you've got a little something you want to add to that PDF later, you add it, upload it, and then Gumroad takes the steps of going out to all those people that already bought it and say, oh, there's been an update to your book. You can re-download it here.
Yep.
Drive-Through Comics, through is spelled THRU, so it's DRIVETHRUCOMICS.com.
A little bit of a pause there when you got to comics.
Yeah,
How do I spell it? Don't mess this
I
up.
had to think. I almost put a K in there. I don't know what it is with me with C's and K's. I'm going nuts over here. But Drive-Through Comics, and I got it. The Drive-Through Comics guy, this was back when I was doing comic conventions, came after me at a comic convention really politely, and I brushed him off. And he came up 3 or 4 more times, was very persistent, very polite, but I'm like, I don't need you to sell a fucking PDF. Get out of here.
Whoa.
Well, that's how I felt. But it was like, yeah, I don't need your help selling PDF. But you know what? They've built a really good community over there. They've got really good stuff, and of course, you get a little bit of knock-on effect there, where people are going to look at other folks' stuff there, and they find yours. So I've had good luck with both not Comixology. I've had good luck with both Gumroad and Drive-Through Comics, and those other ones, the bigger ones. Not only do they make you jump through too many hoops, I get lost there immediately. I don't get enough return on investment.
So I think Brad is right there, and that's why I said before that I think he's the smarter one on this. And I say that sincerely, Brad. You have done eBooks to far better effect than I have over the years, and so I think Brad is the better one to listen to of the two of us.
Well, and as we get further and further into, for lack of a better term, webcomics 3.0, right? Where I think we really are coming into a new zone of webcomics.
Okay.
Where you're going to have a lot more.
I feel like you're springing this on me, but I don't. I'm nervous now and following along.
No, you'll understand in a minute, because you've heard me say this 100 times. We're going to have a lot more integration of things like Patreon into our websites, and things like archives are going to become a Patreon reward. That's already happening on evilink.com. And also, when that happens, you're going to also want to start pushing those ebook sales. In other words, it's gone are the days where you generated ad revenue based on a big archive, but those archives still are useful to generate revenue. And that's where I think ebooks are a big part of that strategy, is in saying you can read, so many of these comics for free. If you want to read the previous storylines, you can either become a Patreon backer, or you can download these ebooks for 99 cents, $1.99.
Right.
I think that is still considered avant-garde right now, but mark my words, over the next 5 years, we're going to see that more and more frequently.
And in a delightful way that only a friend can do, I just want to point out that Brad said his own URL wrong. So it's evil-comic.com,
Yeah.
not evillink.com. Just a reminder, Brad, about your own URL.
Yeah, you'd think I would know that one. Out of all the ones, you'd think I'd know
it's
that
only been
one.
20 years, my friend. So just...
Well, listen, I do believe that unless you have anything you want to add to that ebook, I want to share you this, as long as we're both in a good mood. This is our feature, Thanks for the Kind Words. And this comes from Harmony, who's over at Harmy Wins on Twitter, HARMY Wins on Twitter. And Harmy says, I'd also like to mention ComicLab podcast. I found their podcast shortly into starting to do my new comics project. I spend almost all my free time listening to every episode and playing catch up on over a year's worth of stuff. Brad and Dave have brought me so much joy, laughter, and insight into everything from the moment I decided I was going to get back into webcomics all the way to now. Y'all are amazing, and I'm excited for each new episode and pro tip. Here's to making a go of it.
Wow, very nice words. Now, wait a minute. That feels fake because there's no way that was the character limit of Twitter. That was a good paragraph.
That was a thread. That was part of a larger
thread. A thread. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like how my imposter syndrome immediately was like, that's not real. Twitter couldn't have had that many characters.
You immediately start dissecting it.
Yeah.
All right. I could see your eyes light up as soon as I went over the 144 character count. It was like, no, this is wrong.
I'm immediately going, hey, wait a minute. You said Twitter. Hey, that's really nice. We've had a few people, Brad, that are finding the show in the last couple months, and they're powering through the whole library. And that's a great feeling because I know when I find a podcast that I really enjoy, like I've really been enjoying Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend.
Oh,
and so I've been powering through that whole thing. And it's really a delightful feeling when you welcome these people into your house and into your life and into your drawing studio. And so the fact that Brad and I are being invited into your drawing studio that means the world to us. That's such a nice feeling. So thank you for those kind words. That really does mean the world to us.
Absolutely. And that means that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, who I'm very inured of. Oh, one last time! We got there! The editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my close friend Dave, beating a dead horse Kellett.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong is the thing.
Co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the sponsors today are good friends over at Wacom.com at WACOM.com. The makers of the Wacom One, we thank them for sponsorship. And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice, this time probably correctly, patreon.com/comiclab.
Oh, good job. You did that so well. We've got to change featured on a future episode. I can never say those words. Featured on a future episode. There's two F words there that are really not the F words I'm used to using.
Just take a pencil and your review will be will be featured on an episode.
How about use? We may use your review.
You may hear your review on a future episode. How about that? You may hear your review.
Yeah, we'll just take featured out.
There you go. There's a professional writer over there.